Hello everybody, as promised, today I have my Zeta Reticulant deck profile that I've updated for the Edison format 2010. If you're interested, you can check out the duels I did with this deck yesterday. I'll share a link to that in the description, so go ahead and check that out. But for this list, of course, we start off with our 3 Zeta Reticulant. You can special summon it by tributing an EVA token you control, and while it's in the graveyard, each time a monster your opponent controls is banished or removed from play, you can special summon an EVA token, which is a Dark Fiend level 2 with 500/500 stat line. So this is really the engine of the deck. So the objective here is going to be to banish your opponent's monsters on the field as much as you can in order to summon these free tokens. The second Zeta gets into the grave, all of a sudden, all your banishing cards become much better. Next up, we play the Armageddon Knight. This is going to allow us to send the Zeta from the deck to the graveyard. It also allows us to send Plague, which will give us access to level 6 Synchros, which will be useful for getting rid of Zetas from our hand if we've already drawn them. We also play 3 Caius the Shadow Monarch. When he's summoned, you get to banish a target. So that is going to be extremely powerful in this Zeta deck, as it's also going to give us value out of our tokens, giving us tribute fodder. A lot of the times when I push for game, it involves a Caius, because I'll be able to tribute summon Caius and then summon 3 tokens to the board. There's an example of that in the video that I posted yesterday. Next up, we have 3 DD Assailant. DD Assailant has to be destroyed by battle in order to resolve its effect to banish your opponent's monster, making it a little bit harder to trigger than something like DD Warrior Lady. At last, though, is still a very powerful card, puts pressure on your opponent and forces them to do something other than battle to get around it. Next up, we have DD Warrior, often considered the weakest of them all. After damage calculation, when it battles a monster, banish both the monsters. His effect is mandatory, so it must happen, which is why people consider it the weakest. We also have DD Warrior Lady, of course, the strongest of them all. After damage calculation, you can choose to banish them or not. So here we have our 9 warrior monsters, all of which are going to trigger your Zetas and clear the board. So a lot of times what will happen is you'll crash the warrior or the DD into your opponent's monster, get rid of it, and then you'll get to swing in directly with all your tokens. The tokens are also very good when you're facing down the Hamster Ryko boards, because while you might not be able to attack over the hamster, you will be able to use the tokens to force the Ryko without them being able to pop something that will give them advantage. Alright, we got Gores, of course. Plague Spreader, as I said. Brain Control is going to be good in this deck, as you have your access to Plague and Caius, so you will be able to take advantage of their monster. We also play 3 Dark Cores. Now, Dark Core is probably one of the more iffy cards in the deck. You can discard a card to target one face-up monster on the field and banish it. If you're playing against a Hamster Ryko deck, this might feel kind of bad. Against all other matchups, this is extremely powerful, though. And important to note is that this allows you to get tokens during your main phase 1, which is something a lot of these other cards can't really do, unless you had set a Karma Cup for a whole turn, which means you'll be able to do it and then sag for a Caius within the same phase, which is very good. We also have Foolish Burial to get to that Zeta faster. Heavy Storm, MST. Rhoda searches not only your Armageddons, but any of your DDs, so it's got a lot of utility. We play Double Boundless because they banish, Triple D Prison because they banish, Triple Karma Cut because of the banishing, Mirror Force Judgment, Torrential, and of course Trap Dust Shoot. Now it's important to note though that these discard to banish cards, they're not really going to be that good unless you have multiple Zetas in play, because you really need to either be creating a lot of vantage with this card by getting rid of a card your opponent committed resources to. Otherwise, you are neg-1ing yourself, and this deck doesn't really have a way to plus outside of your opponent committing cards to plays. So it will be difficult to gain advantage. A lot of the times what you're doing is you're just applying incredible pressure. Like every time your opponent does something, you out it, and then you get tokens that your opponent won't be able to deal with because you just outed their monster. So you're able to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. In the side deck, we have some cards to note. Dark Arm Dragon is something I had taken out of the deck Despite having enjoyed it while playing, you can easily set up for this as you are trying to get your Zetas to grave regardless, but at the same time, you don't really want to banish your Zetas. But a lot of the time, Dark Arm puts you in such a game-winning position that it doesn't really matter if you banished your Zeta or not. So this is definitely something to consider in the main deck again. I was playing around with the Ghidorah, the Dragon of Destruction. His effect is you can pay half your life points, destroy as many cards on the field other than itself. If you do, banish them, and then he gains 300 attack for each monster you destroy this way. He also destroys himself or sends himself to the graveyard during the end phase. So this card's really good because if your opponent controls a monster, you can summon it, banish the monster, banish whatever cards they have, and then you'll be able to get tokens from your Zeta. So a lot of times what will happen here is this will be a huge tempo push. You'll be able to summon a bunch of tokens, attack for a bunch of damage without your opponent being able to interact. The only problem with this card though is the fact that you have to normal summon it. So if you used a DD Assailant or something to crash and get the tokens, you would not be able to summon the Ghidorah within the same turn, and you need to have 2 tokens to tribute or 2 monsters to tribute. So it's just unlikely that it's going to play out that way. Plasma is something else I've considered because it can special summon itself, but still, having 3 tokens on field, it would be better to just keep having cards to banish your opponent's monsters at that point, so you can keep pushing him with the tokens and not committing those tokens to plays. Next up, we have 3 Book of Moon here, and these 3 Book of Moon kind of go alongside with these Nobleman and Crossouts. So I've tried main decking Nobleman and Book of Moon in the place of Dark Core and some things like MST and Heavy. And it played very well. For a while I was playing against a lot of Hamster Raikou decks, so the Nobleman and Crossouts a lot of times would just automatically win me the game when I'd hit their Raikou or Hamster on turn 1, and they can't really come back from that because they aren't allowed to get any setup. And I played the Book of Moon alongside of it as kind of a justification for the triple crossout in the main, because I could Book of Moon crossout, which would not be any different in card advantage than me activating a Dark Core or a Karma Cut. And the Book of Moons can be used as protection to keep your DD Warriors and stuff from getting bottomless or deprisoned or Beer Force and such. So that's something I definitely wanted to consider. Depending on what kind of decks I'm facing over and over, I may consider putting the Karma Cut and Book of Moon back in the main. System Dominance is extremely powerful against machine decks, and when you banish machines on the field, you will be able to get your tokens. So I put this in the side just to mention against those machine decks, but to be honest with you, at the same time, this deck has a really good matchup against Machinas, because every time they summon a Fortress, it's going to get banished, and you know that they're only going to have 3 chances to summon a Fortress against this deck, right? And they need me not to have a banished card. And to be honest with you, I will have one every time just because of the ratios in the deck. And in the extra deck, the only really important things to note is that you need your level 6s. You do play a couple extra level 6s like Urquiza in order to make sure you have targets, and Piercing can be useful sometimes. We play double Armory Arm because you can synchro with the tokens, and sometimes you'll synchro with the tokens to make Armory Arm so you can attack over things. Very useful. So everybody, that's my updated Zeta Reticulant deck profile. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, comments, or criticism, I'd love to hear it in the comments. And have a nice day, guys.